So while the rest of the world is falling into absolute chaos, I've had some time to sit back and take a look through my dreaded backlog. There's a Vesuvius of classic games in my bedroom that I should have played years ago, but as always, title after title just gets added to the pile every time a game like The Last of Us Part 2 is released. I've been needing an excuse to make my way through the list for years, and I probably should try to do something productive with my time instead of playing Bloodborne for the 30th time. I mean, I'm 21 years old, and I still haven't played Doom, Half-Life, Mass Effect, Devil May Cry, Final Fantasy VIII, Eco, Bully, Deus Ex, Infamous, Mafia, hell, even Metal Gear Solid has eluded me to this day. But hey, I've played Disney's That's So Raven 2 Supernatural style on GBA. So I managed to work my way through some of the backlog and eventually stumbled upon a game that I did play a little of back in the day, but never actually finished. A game that at this point is so iconic that even the silhouette of the box art is instantly recognizable. This was Bioshock. A title that always crops up in lists of must-play games and best plot twists, but it was actually on my second playthrough that it truly clicked for me. Now that's not to say I didn't enjoy my first playthrough, I actually loved it and the plot twist is genuinely surprising if you've actually managed to go 13 years without having it spoiled, that is. But the reason I say that the second playthrough somehow hits harder is that the revelation made towards the end of the game makes so much more sense in hindsight. You come to realize that there were little hints throughout subtly foreshadowing the reveal, and the message it tries to convey is, at least in my opinion, more impactful when you already know the twist. Now I get that I am being quite ambiguous at the moment in regards to said twist, and that's because the game still is best experienced blind. If you've managed to go this long without having the reveal spoiled for you, then I do truly recommend that you go out there and play Bioshock before watching this video. So this is your spoiler warning now, I guess. My time with Bioshock was a fantastic experience, glitches in the PS4 remaster aside. I enjoyed pretty much all of it, from the shooting, to the hacking, to the plasmids, to the characters, to the iconic Big Daddies, and especially the world building. But the most impressive thing that Bioshock manages to accomplish is your importance and place in the world as the player. The whole narrative is weaved around you, and despite how things may look on initial inspection, everything that happened was planned out for you ahead of time. How many times has a new game been announced that boasts a massive, open, fully explorable world and super detailed customization options? Well, pretty often I'd say. They always proudly claim to have multiple endings, upgradable skill trees, character creators, endless side quests. This is all fine and dandy, but Bioshock seeks to give the player a completely different experience. It's perfectly content with making use of a more linear level design. True, you can go back and forth through the areas as you please, but to progress through the main plot, you have to move forward in a predetermined path. You can't set off from the beginning and just go do what you want in any order you want. You have to obey the game's instructions. It holds your hand and guides you on rails throughout, but somehow manages to make this fit so seamlessly into the narrative. Let me explain. Bioshock begins with our playable character Jack crash landing on a plane in the middle of the ocean. We make our way to a nearby lighthouse and inside we find the bathysphere, a kind of local transportation system that takes us down underwater and into the city of Rapture. Rapture is a sort of utopia built by Andrew Ryan, and soon after its construction the people discovered Adam, a genetic material that grants the host different types of powers. Eventually, the residents of the city got drunk on Adam and sent the whole community spiraling into a self-destructive mess. When we arrive in Rapture, everything is already hell on earth, with Ryan locked up in his castle and everybody else left to fight for themselves. The citizens will attack you on sight to try and drain you of any precious Adam you may be carrying, and it's not until we hear the friendly Irish voice of Atlas do we have some sort of comfort in this dystopian wreck. He asks us to help him save his family, who are trapped in a nearby submarine, which doesn't go too well. Now Atlas kindly asks us to help him get revenge on Andrew Ryan, and this is where most of the game takes place. We eventually find Ryan, but he reveals to us that Atlas has been using us the whole time. As it turns out, Jack was conditioned from birth to be very subjective in regards to mind control, and will obediently obey any command uttered with the phrase, "Would you kindly?" Also, Atlas is revealed to be Frank Fontaine, a gangster that was believed to be dead for years, and he mentions that there is no Atlas, there never was. Now, whilst this is one of the greatest plot twists anyway, from a narrative perspective, it truly comes into its own when you consider how the gameplay so perfectly complements the message. And this is why Bioshock would not be as effective as it is if it were a movie or a novel. It had to be a video game. Jack is as bland of a protagonist as you can get. He doesn't have a face, his only words spoken are at the beginning and end of the game in cutscenes, hell, he doesn't even have legs. But this is done by design. The more of a blank slate a character is, the easier it is to project yourself onto them. So when we hear Atlas, the man who's been our only friend throughout our journey of Rapture, not only become another villain, but also discover he's been literally controlling us from the start, it hurts. While Jack undoubtedly feels betrayed by Atlas, so do we. The whole experience is heightened even further by the game being a first-person shooter. Since we're playing from the first-person perspective, we can only know so much, whatever Jack knows. So when the reveal is inevitably delivered, the player and the character get to share that gut-wrenching feeling at the same time. As we've already discussed, Bioshock is a linear experience, but it's just so smart with its execution that the game couldn't really have been done any other way. In fact, that's kind of the point. Other AAA titles tend to act rather braggadocious with their whole be who you want to be and do what you want to do gameplay. You can choose which skills you want to invest in developing and get to carve out your own path throughout the narrative. Bioshock doesn't give you that option. The same way that you're locked into playing as Jack and following the on-screen objectives, Jack himself is forced to comply with the orders that others lay down for him. He is just as trapped into unfolding someone else's plans as we are. These massive games with fully explorable sandboxes tell you that you're free to roam and act as you please, but you're still usually bound to play by the laws that the developers have set. Stray too far away from the borders of the world and you'll likely hit an invisible barrier. Some games use lighting and subtle visual clues to guide you in the right direction, or just place a cap on your max level to prevent the player from becoming too overpowered. Bioshock doesn't have to trick the player into thinking that this is a game for them to explore as they please. In Rapture, there are locked doors, cave-ins and such that automatically make some areas inaccessible, but you're always being guided in a certain direction by Atlas anyway. He asks, "Would you kindly go here and do this?" You obey. You don't get to refuse and wander off. When the game gives you a prompt like press X to do the thing, the game will just stay idle until you do it. If you try to break the narrative and don't press the button, the game will wait for you to perform the action and in turn obey the command. At the start of Bioshock, Jack arrives at the lighthouse and slowly descends into the madness of Rapture, and the way it's all put together through musical cues, art style, and atmosphere, it's kind of like a horror game. If you were to actually arrive here in real life, chances are that you'd book it to the exit as soon as you see this. You would not hang around, and this is a common complaint among horror games. If you are thrown into the situation that Miles Upshaw finds himself in during the events of Outlast, you'd be out of that asylum straight away. But Jack doesn't have a choice in the matter. We later discover that everything was orchestrated by Atlas. Even the initial plane crash was brought on after Jack read a note with the phrase, "Would you kindly?" instructing him to hijack the plane once he'd reached a specific set of coordinates, and in turn leading him to the entrance of Rapture. After arriving, Jack is forced to stay and help Atlas in the same way that the player is forced to stay and follow the game's objectives. An attentive player may be clued into the fact that Atlas isn't being entirely truthful through subtle hints and audio logs. He asks us to save his wife and child that are trapped in a local submarine, but if we go here earlier, before the story requires it and it explodes when approached, we find that the sub is actually empty. In fact, he mentions his wife and child by name, Moira and Patrick. Now when Jack reaches Fort Frolic, there are posters scattered throughout the area promoting a play. Patrick and Moira, A Story of Love After Death. This play was clearly Atlas's inspiration for his false family. Also, the supposedly Irish vigilante makes an awful lot of American references, like this sounding off like the 4th of July, and every time we get a yard ahead, Ryan goes and moves the goal line down to the other side of the field. People have actually made complaints that they didn't trust Atlas from the start, but were forced to help him anyway. But the problem is these people are missing the point. Like I said at the start of the video, everything that has happened was planned out for you. You were always going to do what Atlas says, whether you trust him or not. He has you in metaphorical chains, dragging you around, a fact hinted at by Jack's not-so-subtle wrist tattoos. Providing you haven't had the reveal spoiled for you ahead of time, I do actually think that most people don't see it coming. But why is this? Why do we, as the player, just take Atlas at his word and put our trust in him? Well, aside from the obvious notion that he's the only friendly character that we interact with, I think there's a more interesting discussion to be had. If you disregard any plot-related reasons for Jack putting his trust in Atlas and focus on yourself as a gamer, you come to realize that we've kind of been conditioned for this. Provided you've played at least a handful of games, you'll come to realize that there are particular traits and habits that they all seem to share. Have you ever started a game and realized that you subconsciously know the controls already without a tutorial? That's because, as an example, most first-person shooters have used the same button layout since Alien Resurrection pioneered the control scheme in the year 2000. Gamers end up playing most games subconsciously since we're so used to following certain commands without thought. We know not to shoot the red barrel standing 3 feet away from you. We know that when you're being pressured to proceed in the main storyline, you can go off and do side quests for another 30 hours without consequence. When some random person asks if we can help fetch something for them or help with their chores, we just do it. We don't ask why or refuse, we just follow the command that the game has laid out for us, and that's what's so brilliant about Bioshock. Whilst it's true that Jack was conditioned from a very early age to obey specific commands without thought, as gamers, so are we. The player does have some form of freedom in their actions when taking into account choosing their weapon upgrades, plasmids, and tonics. You are free to equip whichever specific skills you personally would find useful and that complements your own unique playstyle, which prevents the game from feeling too restricted and on rails. However, there's only really one instance of free choice that you have in Bioshock that amounts to any real consequence. Do you rescue or harvest the Little Sisters? Harvesting the sisters will grant the player double the amount of Adam to use for upgrades to their skills, but rescuing them will reward you with a gift package for every 3 that you save, plus the quote-unquote happy ending. This not only provides Bioshock with an interesting dynamic between the player and the Little Sisters, but sparks a conflicting dilemma between the gameplay and the narrative, both of which end up clashing with their themes and asks the player to truly think about their actions. This is called Ludonarrative Dissonance. Now this is where I've probably lost a lot of you, so just bear with me. Like most video games, the gameplay in Bioshock promotes the philosophy of Randian objectivism. In simple terms, playing the game encourages selfishness and working to make yourself as powerful as you can in order to make the journey through Rapture as easy as possible. The whole point is to better yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to throw others under the bus to better yourself, but that an individual's moral purpose in life is their own happiness, and that productive achievement is greatly encouraged. In the context of Bioshock, this means harvesting the Little Sisters to make yourself stronger. On the other hand, the narrative promotes selflessness and looking out for others, especially those who aren't always capable of looking out for themselves. Tenenbaum implores us to spare the Little Sisters, and when we reach what's considered the good ending, she says, "They offered you the city, and you refused it." The message of the plot seems to be anti-objectivism and in turn against the beliefs of Andrew Ryan. I mean, Ryan built Rapture in secret for the world's elite to live in luxury without the political, social, and religious anxieties of a post-World War II society. His beliefs are as follows: look out for yourself, as long as you don't break the law, do what you can to improve your life, and everything is black and white. There are those who are good and law-abiding, and there are criminals. There's the rich and the poor. There's no room for spectrums or loopholes, just absolutes. I guess that something to take away from Bioshock is that at some point in our lives, we're all dealt a hand that we weren't expecting, and that sends us into a feeling of lack of control. Whether you believe in the concept of fate and destiny or not, Most of us end up living a large chunk of our lives doing things that we didn't plan or choose. But while many of us end up on the same path, heading in the same direction to the same place, it's our choices along the way that matters and what makes us who we are. Hey everyone, thank you all very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. I did actually manage to put this video together a lot quicker than I did with the Dark Souls video. I guess I just wanted to get all my feelings out while it's all still fresh in my mind. I'm actually in the middle of playing Bioshock 2 right now for the first time, and then whilst I've already played it, I will then go and play Bioshock Infinite. Work my way through the franchise, I guess. But anyway, that's all from me. Again, I do hope you enjoyed. If you found this video interesting, entertaining, or at least slightly enjoyable, then would you kindly consider giving this video a like and subscribe if you want to stay posted and stay in the loop with any future videos I may or may not make. Thanks for watching. See ya.